Hey, what's going on, guys? The Horror Man back with a double review of Flesh for Frankenstein and Blood for Dracula. Flesh for Frankenstein and Blood for Dracula were both written and directed by Paul Morrissey, and they were filmed back to back using the same sets and some of the same cast. For me, these two movies just automatically go together, and I can't imagine owning one or even watching one without the other. I bought them at the same time, and I usually watch them back to back. And so, instead of doing two separate reviews, I decided to review them together in one video. Before I discuss Flesh for Frankenstein, I want to say I've always found it interesting that both of these films are part of the Criterion Collection. Or at least they were. I'm still kicking myself all these years later for not picking up the Criterion releases when I had them in my hands. These two DVDs, which I do own, are from Image Entertainment, and like the Criterion releases, they are long out of print. I bought these years ago, and I still remember when and where. I was working near a local mall, and on a break, I decided to go inside to get some Dunkin' Donuts. The line was super long, so while I waited for it to get a bit shorter, I decided to run into FYE, which was right next door. I did my normal quick search of the usual titles I'd look for. At the time, I could not find these two movies anywhere. That day, though, FYE, for whatever reason, had both. After that, I never saw another copy of either of these DVDs in person ever again. I'm glad I went into the mall that day, because, like I said, these DVDs are now long out of print. Of course, they both recently got 4K and Blu-ray releases, but they're really expensive. I'll start with my review of Flesh for Frankenstein, since this was the first released of the two. Flesh for Frankenstein is a 1973 horror film, also known as Andy Warhol's Frankenstein. And although Andy Warhol's name is on this one as well as Blood for Dracula, he had very little, if anything, to do with production. He just gave Paul Morrissey permission to use his name. Flesh for Frankenstein stars Udo Kier as Baron Frankenstein. He's married to his sister, Baroness Frankenstein, and they have two young children. They are married in name only, and stay together only for the kids. There is not a lot going on in their bedroom, if you know what I mean. This doesn't stop the Baroness, however, from basically being a sex maniac. But I'll get to that in a bit. Baron Frankenstein, along with his assistant Otto, spends most of his time in his laboratory. His dream is to create the master race. He has already built what he thinks will be the perfect woman, and now he just needs to complete the man. Once he does, his two zombies can mate to create the master race he envisions. And then Baron Frankenstein will have full control over them. All that's left is the perfect male head with the perfect male brain. He needs a man with a strong sex drive. So he and Otto go to a bordello. They position themselves outside, waiting for a male to exit. Meanwhile, farmhand Nicholas, played by Joe D'Alessandro, has taken his friend Sasha to the bordello. Sasha has decided he would like to become a monk, and Nicholas is trying to talk him out of it. He thinks the company of naked women will convince his friend otherwise. But when Sasha is seen leaving the bordello, Baron Frankenstein mistakes him as the perfect male. In actuality, this particular man has no sex drive whatsoever. Nicholas and Sasha are followed by Baron Frankenstein and Otto. Nicholas is knocked out from behind after being hit on the head. And Sasha is decapitated. After all, it's only his head they're after. Obviously, things don't go as planned for Frankenstein. And things get even worse when Nicholas is hired by the Baroness. She puts him to work in the castle and in her bedroom. Her sex drive, unlike Sasha's, is a strong one, and Nicholas is more than willing to satisfy. Soon, though, he becomes suspicious of the ongoings in Frankenstein's lab. In an attempt to uncover the truth and save his friend, it may be Nicholas's own life at stake. Flesh for Frankenstein is full of flesh and full of gore. There's plenty of nudity on display and plenty of internal organs on display as well. I really love Frankenstein's lab, and the cinematography in the film is just beautiful. Udo Kier is brilliant as always as Baron Frankenstein. I really dig Joe D'Alessandro's accent in this. The female zombie is gorgeous, and I can understand why Frankenstein felt she was the perfect female specimen. The practical effects are great, and the movie was actually filmed for a 3D presentation. If you've seen other 3D films of the time, then you probably know what to expect. I love the music in Flesh for Frankenstein. It's very 70s. And the whole film just puts a unique twist on the Frankenstein story. There's plenty of flesh for Frankenstein. And there's plenty of blood for Dracula. Also known as Andy Warhol's Dracula, this was released the following year, in 1974. In this one, Udo Kier plays the Count himself, Count Dracula. He's an ailing version of the vampire, with just weeks left to live. Arno Jürgen, who played Otto in Flesh for Frankenstein, plays Anton, the Count's servant, in this. He went from Frankenstein's assistant to Dracula's servant. It is decided that Dracula must leave his castle in Romania to travel to Italy to find a virgin. A virgin bride, and more specifically, a virgin's blood, will help to prolong his life. Italy is a country with many religious women, which in Dracula and Anton's mind equals virgins. A once prosperous family who is now struggling financially learns about the Count's arrival. With 4 single daughters, the parents believe it will be a perfect match for one of them. If one of their daughters marries the Count, they will be rich again. Joe D'Alessandro stars as Mario in this one, as the family's servant. Not only is he serving the family with his work ethic, but he's also serving each of the daughters, serving them the D. As Count Dracula spends time with each of the single daughters, he questions if they are truly virgins. The simple act of sucking their blood will confirm it. If the blood is not from a virgin, Dracula will become even sicker. Bound to a wheelchair, he struggles to find his virgin bride. It doesn't help that Mario keeps sleeping with all of them. Then he figures out the Count's true intentions for being there, and is apparently the only man willing to try to stop him. D'Alessandro really is the fly in Kier's ointment in these films. Blood for Dracula is full of blood, and full of nudity. Keep in mind, these movies are from the 70s, guys, so you know what that means. Lots and lots of 70s bush. There's a ton of full frontal nudity in Blood for Dracula. More even than Flesh for Frankenstein. I'd say there's a bit less gore in this one, though. There's still plenty, but less. I guess I should have mentioned earlier that both Blood for Dracula and Flesh for Frankenstein were both rated X. That tells you how much gore, and specifically nudity, there is. Between the two, I probably prefer Blood for Dracula, which is funny in a way, because I've always preferred Flesh for Frankenstein. Rewatching them now though, I really enjoyed this one so much more. I love the film's opening title sequence. It's so simple, but it really sets the mood. Udo Kier is fantastic as Dracula. Joe D'Alessandro's accent is slightly different, but it's still there. The cinematography is beautiful once again. And I just really like the storyline in this one. Again, it's a unique twist on the classic tale. I enjoyed seeing Dracula make his way through each of the potential brides, finding out that none of them were virgins. I really love both of these movies, Flesh for Frankenstein and Blood for Dracula. Have you seen them? If so, what do you think of them? Comment below and let me know. And tell me, which do you prefer? Thanks for watching, guys. Hit that thumbs up and be kind. Subscribe.